Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to those brave souls who are still willing to be here this time of the afternoon. My name is Nicolai Massyn. I'm from Green Gain Consulting. We focus on the fields of doing legal compliance and legal updating, and the topic that I'll be addressing today is how to keep up with the constant changes in legislation and in regulations, and what do you need to do to comply with that. And I'll also give a brief overview of the changes to the construction regulations, and we might also have time to look at the changes to waste management legislation. Okay, first of all, let's look at the following scenario. If you do not have access to up-to-date and new legislation, you are the CEO of a company, a construction company, and you didn't know the construction regulations have changed and that many of the requirements are completely different. You go and you do construction on the site. What happens? First of all, you're guilty of a criminal offense because you didn't have the required construction permits in place, you haven't appointed the correct people, and you can be held personally liable in this regard. Then if you're found guilty of this criminal offense, what can happen to you? You can get a fine or you can get imprisonment, and also there is a continuous offense for every single day that you're out of compliance with the requirements of the regulations. You see that you can get up to 8,200 rands of a fine per day or additional days of imprisonment. So that's something that you really don't want. How do you prevent this? Obviously, we need to have access to the correct legislation. Let's have a look at the type of laws and regulation and requirements that you have to comply with if you are a company that do construction, that do manufacturing of products, or whether you provide services, specialized services or otherwise. First of all, if you provide products, there's legislation and regulations relating to product safety, the energy efficiency they have, which today is a very good example of. We're seeing energy efficiency built into these products on a very basic level. How do we dispose of our products after we've used them? Do we need to register and register our products before we're allowed to sell them? Equipment, in other words, minimum requirements before you utilize your equipment. Standards that you have to comply with, certain load-bearing minimums, certain pressures, certain voltages, etc. These things are all regulated either by law or by standards. So SABS standards, design requirements. The requirements relating to architects and engineers have changed considerably, and they have to take many new factors into consideration. How would they know what to do, what to take into consideration? Again, it's by way of regulation, it's by way of standards, SABS codes and other codes. Then on the construction site, there's a whole host of new authorizations that you have to comply with, new appointments, training that needs to be done, certain competence requirements, risk assessments, inspections, auditing and reporting to the authorities on your performance. And then the inspections themselves. If you are managing a building, if you are doing construction on a specific site, there's quite a bit of inspections that needs to be done, and it has to be done by approved inspection authorities. Therefore, how do you know about these? Again, you get that information by way of legislation updates. Same with training. Minimum requirements to perform certain functions like engineering, architects, etc. And then permits and licenses are required prior to doing certain things, and these change all the time. It might relate to environmental issues, environmental permits and processes. It might relate to planning processes, heritage requirements, electricity requirements, safety, design. So there's quite a large host of things that you need to take into consideration. All of these requirements are brought to you by way of regulation legislation and standards. So why do we need to get hold of this updated legislation? First of all, there's corporate liability for your organization that you work with or belong to, and then you also have personal liability. In other words, you can be held personally liable for non-compliances if you were in charge of a project or you are in charge of a construction site, etc. Then there's a risk of injury or damage occurring if you don't have the required specifications for the products that you're doing. And also remember, the Consumer Protection Act is also there to protect the consumer. So if you were utilizing subpar products or providing subpar services, then in terms of the Consumer Protection Act, the end user always has a recourse against you. Then there's a certification risk. If your organization is certified according to ISO 14000, OSHA 18000, or ISO 9001, and you do not comply with the standards that apply to your organization or industry, what is going to happen? You will not retain your certification. So there's a real risk of loss of certification. Also, client claims, if you don't comply with the requirements that you're supposed to do, there's a real risk that organizations that you do work for will claim against you because the installation was not correct, the product didn't comply with certain standards. There's also, obviously, together with all of these, there's your reputational risk, meaning that in the eyes of the public, because of public exposure, media, social media, you will be deemed to be a less worthy competitor in the market because your name has been, so to speak, pulled through the mud because of subpar production of services. And also there's a risk of insurance repudiation, which is quite a real risk. If you construct a building or if you manufacture something and those products and services that you utilize do not comply with the required standards, there's a very real chance if something happens and there's a catastrophic failure, there's a fire of sorts, that your insurance will not claim, will not cover those claims. Or if there's a professional liability claim against you, your insurance is not going to, will not cover those events if you haven't complied with all the requirements. Therefore, you need to know what those requirements are. Right, so where do we get free sources of legislation and standards? There's quite a robust, a lot of activity on the internet. So if we have a look on the slideshow, in South Africa, there's two very good sources. First of all, Acts Online, which is a commercial site. It doesn't charge, but it gets revenue through advertising. And then there's the government printer, which is gpwonline.co.za. Then there's some international websites. If you work in the African countries, in the African continent, there's 3 very good sites that you can utilize to get some health, safety, environmental and planning legislation: lexidin.nl, ecolex.org, and safely with a .i.org. Then African government agencies. These African governments have got their own websites where they publish their information. They are not that regularly maintained, but it's always a good place to go do your first sourcing to get to legislation. So in Namibia, we got gov.na, Botswana is elaws.gov.bw, Zimbabwe necz.org.zm, and Lesotho gov.ls, Swaziland gov.sz. Then we have to look at if you subscribe to some sort of a paid-for updating service. Now, why would you just subscribe to a paid-for updating service rather than utilizing a free service? There's quite a few benefits. Your information will be delivered to you in a client and an industry and a site-specific format so that you can apply and consume it more easily. There will be explanation of the applicability to your organization. Also, the product that it is, the platform that it is placed upon, it is usually embedded as part of your check and risk management software so that it's more easily consumable and you can link it more easily with your risks and other such things. Furthermore, a supplier might be providing you with audit questionnaires that you might complete, with checklists. So this makes it easier for yourself to do your self-assessments, to check your gap analysis and ensure that you are within compliance. Furthermore, this service that is provided can be backed up with legal liability training, can be backed up with professional services such as consulting, compliance, auditing, and other legal advice. Our company organization has a product in the market called Digilex, and this is exactly the type of service that we provide. You will see a slide where there are certain African countries. These are the areas that we actually provide our services to in all those SADC countries, as well as the DRC, and Zambia has just recently been included. So we grow with our clients. As you can see, we've got many different modules relating to check management and risk management and food safety and so on and so forth, and we're growing it exponentially every month. Okay, the module I think that is important I just want to focus on is the legal compliance module, and usually in the context of management systems, these legal registers are provided for in a format that suits a specific site and a specific industry and a specific client, and that's the way that we also provide it. And we find that this is a very good way of doing it, makes it easy for the clients to consume.